Tonight on 48 Hours, a special live edition, China Rebellion.
From all walks, the people are supporting the students.
Is it worth dying?
Yeah.
Hunger strikers put their lives on the line.
If one man died of hunger, the whole nature would become a revolutionary.
And millions more take up the cry for democracy. People power in the People's Republic.
No one can defeat the people.
Shaking communism to its foundations. Making history tonight. Good evening. Dan Rather reporting live from Beijing, China. What a place, what a time, what a story. It's Friday morning here, and this is Tiananmen Square, the symbolic center of the People's Republic of China. Today, it's the People's Square, all right. More than 1 million Chinese demanding democracy and freedom and proclaiming the new revolution. And the old guard is on guard, unsteady and unsure of exactly what to do or where this may all lead. Now, at around 5 o'clock this morning, we've now confirmed Premier Li Peng, the second man down in the government, and the Communist Party Secretary's top man, Zhao Jiang, came here to this square to meet for the first time here with the hunger strikers. Another desperate effort to defuse the situation. The Communist Party leader boarded one of the buses back there full of hunger strikers, and he told them we should have been here before. He then asked them to end the strike, saying, and I quote now, "Your intentions are good, but things are complicated." Zhao Jiang made them a promise. He said that the party will not end the dialogue when you stop the hunger strike. Now, also, we've just been handed this piece of paper in Chinese, an official pronouncement from the capital workers, the workers here in Beijing, calling for a general strike to begin at noon tomorrow and to last for 24 hours unless the demands of the hunger strikers are met. Now, because of the extraordinary events such as this unfolding here all over China, that we've postponed our scheduled report on deprogramming tonight to bring you this special live edition of 48 Hours, China Rebellion, a still developing story that's growing and spreading like a spring storm. The heavens cried today, said one Chinese, for a nation's children. These sons and daughters of China, some fasting now for 6 straight days, a few going without food or water, continued their campaign for democracy, refusing to compromise. You had to believe, as many in this superstitious country do, that the rainstorm was an omen. For May is a dry month, a month when you realize how close Beijing lies to the Great Gobi Desert. Today's torrents are seen as a sign that the term of the aging leadership has come to an end. Certainly, they believe that now in Nanjing and Chongqing, Shanghai and Xi'an, and all the other cities now swept up in the wave of rebellion that has rolled across 28 provinces and regions in China. In Shanghai, people power derailed Mikhail Gorbachev's schedule. City leaders confined the visiting Soviet Communist Party chief to a series of ceremonial affairs. It was Chinese TV that showed these pictures on their midday news. You would not have seen anything like this a month ago. This is the heart of the protest, of the movement, of the rebellion. This is where the hunger strikers are. You can't be in here and not feel a surge of emotion and respect, if not admiration. Here's what happened today. With rain threatening this morning, they quickly moved in buses where the hunger strikers, remember how weak some of these people are, could be put aboard the buses. The Red Cross got the buses in here, indicating how everybody in this country, everybody is concerned about these kids who are on the hunger strike.
刚刚都登记了，生活一天不如一天，所以我们才起来。我们代表是大多数老百姓的利益。李鹏还有邓小平，特别是邓小平，他是中国的太上皇。
Deng Xiaoping is like an emperor.
这是我认为这是一篇独自事件的彻底的反人民宣言，所以我们非常气愤。10月27号都不怕是举行了大规模的游行。
Deng Xiaoping originally said, "We have over 300,000 soldiers. These are just a few students. We don't fear them." Now he refuses to speak with us.
These are the pictures that Chinese leaders wanted most to be seen. The secretary of the Communist Party, Zhao Ziyang, and Premier Li Peng displaying their best bedside manner at Union Hospital, ministering to victims of the hunger strike. Certainly the words of compromise were there. Your enthusiasm for democracy is commendable, said Zhao, but then the bottom line. We urge you students to end your hunger strike.
Li Peng 特别是邓小平两人都必须
Li Peng must go. Every day our living level has been getting lower and lower, so the people have finally stood up. Li Peng must go.
我们代表是大多数老百姓的利益。
At first, this perhaps was written off as simply the cry of rebellious youth. Not anymore. Now it is increasingly the shared demand of their mothers and fathers, who have joined in the daily parades into the heart of Beijing.
While the celebrations continue, particularly on the streets around Tiananmen Square, in the square itself, anger rising. Anger directed specifically in what people say and what the banners say, directed at the top leaders of the government. Deng Xiaoping comes in for his share. Li Peng certainly is the person at whom most of the anger seems directed. He's the second man down in the government, for all intents and purposes, the man who runs the country.
Thursday, inside the Great Hall of the People, Premier Li Peng met face-to-face with the student leaders of this China rebellion. In an extraordinary broadcast on nationwide TV, the students by turns lectured, interrogated, and scolded their nation's top leaders, including Communist Party leaders. Do you really run the government for the people, said one of the strikers. We expect answers and immediate results, said another. But the talks collapsed after Li Peng said the students should leave the square without preconditions. Tell them to leave the square. As with the earlier visit to the hospital, the students were unmoved. One hunger striker who was there said the government doesn't comprehend the power of this movement. He was speaking from a bed in Beijing hospital where he was taken after fainting during the meeting.
The students are beginning to try to direct traffic. Now, at this intersection, one of the very busy intersections, quite a ways from Tiananmen Square, the students have taken over the area where you would generally see a policeman and are doing their best to direct the traffic. It is not chaos. It's certainly not anarchy yet, but it's beginning to go at the edges, and the rain has not helped, as the students do their best to do the job that the police usually do in these areas. The government may have hoped that the tremendous downpour would have somehow dampened enthusiasm and driven the crowds away. For a few minutes during the worst of it, yes, but they came right back as the weather started to clear. What do they know about the demonstrations?
他们知道什么今天的活动什么的，他们知道有什么事，他们知道天安门现在怎么样。We know.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Hello.
One thing you may want to note, while the anger has been rising in Tiananmen Square and the rain today has not helped that, on the streets, beginning not very far from the square, the atmosphere remains festive. For Mikhail Gorbachev, who returned to Moscow today, this was to have been a week in the spotlight. Instead, he spent it in the shadow of rank-and-file Chinese citizens. Gorbachev eventually called the protests a painful but necessary part of the changes that are rocking communism around the world. For reporters who often flatter themselves as being eyewitnesses to history, this looks like the real thing. When we come back, two of our veteran reporters, Bob Simon and Susan Spencer, will take you inside the heart of the protests. And later, Charles Geralt will join me for his unique perspective on the China Rebellion.
Choosing the right brand of paint can really drive you up a wall. You know, scrubbable, durable, spatter-free. And guessing about whether or not the quality is there can be one big mess. So don't guess. Ask someone who really knows what it takes to make great paint. And Ace makes their own. Ace Paint. Don't get mixed up with all the others. Ace 7-Star, our best interior flat latex, is just $9.97 a gallon.
Nothing's rougher on a man's face than shaving. That's why there's Skin Bracer. It's more than an aftershave. It soothes, cools, tightens pores, so it's good for your skin.
Thanks. I needed that.
Skin Bracer Aftershave.
5 minutes.
This is one of 570 million refund locations for American Express traveler's checks. Now you can get a refund virtually anywhere there's a phone. Only from American Express traveler's checks. So if your bank doesn't carry them, go to one that does.
Back at teeming Tiananmen Square, yet another demonstration passes by. And the early indications from the hunger strikers inside are that they didn't buy what the top government leader and the top Communist Party leader had to say to them early this morning inside those buses of the hunger strikers. For the past several days and nights, this square and all of the nearby hospitals, kind of makeshift MASH units now, have been the scene of extraordinary drama. Thousands of people not just demanding democracy and freedom, but literally willing to die for it.
By the dawn's early light, you can see that some new flags have been unfurled overnight. They are on the roof of the museum overlooking the square. It is the Museum of the Chinese Revolution, and these are revolutionary flags expressing support of the students put there by the museum workers, all government employees. The students had set up their own government of sorts. They directed traffic, imposed order. Whenever scuffles broke out, they were quickly brought under control. There was a constant sense of urgency. People were always passing by in heroic poses, borrowed it sometimes seemed from the French Revolution. But in the medical unit at the center of the square, there was no posing at all. It had the feel of a field hospital in the middle of a fierce campaign.
I'm a medical doctor. I care very much about these students. And sometimes I feel like to cry.
The student leader from Beijing hadn't eaten anything in 6 days. He was hospitalized for exhaustion, but after 12 hours insisted on coming back to the square. How do you feel?
I was feeling.
No feeling?
No feeling at all. Just, how to say? Dizzy. Maybe my mind, dizzy. Maybe my mind is a little bit out of order.
But you still want to continue?
Yeah.
Do you think this is another revolution?
From a certain point of view, you can say so, but it's not a violent revolution. It's a very peaceful one.
Did you ever think you'd ever see anything like this?
I never believed this could happen, you know.
Do you think this is another revolution?
No, I don't think it's a revolution like the revolution happening 40 years ago or 10 years ago, like Cultural Revolution, just for a movement. I call it a movement, just push the democratic step forward.
China has been through 3 revolutions this century, all imposed from the top. If these are in fact the first stirrings of the next one, it will be coming from the other direction, from the ground up. While the ambulances keep carting students off to hospitals, the loudspeakers here keep blaring out expressions of support. It was just announced that China's Workers' Union has donated 100,000 yuan to the student movement. That's almost $15,000, an enormous amount of money here. The students were inundated with donations. They were coming from everywhere.
All kinds of people.
All kinds of people?
Yes.
They were receiving other gifts as well. Food, of course, for those not on hunger strike, soup, and sympathy. Signs of support. New messages in an old hand. This one was from professors. Flowers, too, for these latter-day flower children. Some Buddhist monks passed by to express solidarity. So did a few thousand other delegations. The big questions today were, what would the government do, and how would the skies behave? The students were taking measures. Why are they getting on buses today?
Because it is said that there will be a rain. So the Red Cross, I don't know how to say it.
The Red Cross, yes.
You know that. They offer this bus to hold the students.
So the hunger strike now continues on the bus?
Yes. Do you think it's strange? But we'll strike to death, you know. It's no problem.
How long has it been since you have eaten?
For 48 hours.
You haven't eaten in 48 hours?
Yeah.
Here's something new here today. For the first time, the students are reading newspapers because for the first time, the newspapers are reporting what's been going on. Here is a picture of the demonstration on a front page of one of the dailies. The papers were already being read out loud. Public broadcasting. Television coverage was being scrutinized, and students were admiring advertisements for themselves. Blow-ups transformed into instant posters. Then the rains came, sending students scurrying into tents and plastic bags. The marchers continued, undaunted, their essential message captured perhaps by a Dixieland rendition of the communist anthem, the Internationale, played by high school students in a state of self-proclaimed revolt against the communist leaders of China.
Today, this was the sound of the city. The students' refusal to eat or drink is taking its toll. Beijing Emergency Medical Center, first stop for those who have collapsed in Tiananmen Square.
About 30 hunger strikers have arrived here at the medical center so far today, every one of them encouraged on by the crowd.
The crowd cheers, one doctor said, because through the strike, the students are putting their lives on the line to send a message for everyone else. And so there were cheers as well for the workers from the Beijing oxygen factory for their donation of oxygen. Cheers for the union leader for his donation of money. And for the medical workers for their donation of medical supplies.
In that way, I felt I was giving them a helping hand, too.
Jane Bell, a Red Cross volunteer who's been working inside for the last 4 days, says the students can use all of it.
Once you lose a lot of your body fluids, you become disoriented and your mind stops, your brain stops slowing down and functioning, and then a lot of them go unconscious. And so by giving them fluids back up and IVs, then they're bringing the kids back and giving them the strength that they need to function for the body fluids.
You know, people have said here are students who are willing to die for democracy. You're a health professional. Is that too melodramatic?
No, I don't really think it's melodramatic at all. In fact, we have to really talk to the kids, even after we get IVs started, to get them to drink. I tend to be able to talk them into it, tell them that their mother would want them to drink. Some of the parents have tried to talk their kids to stop, and they don't want to. You know, they believe in what they're doing.
为了我们国家的兴亡，为了我们国家的兴亡，为了我们国家的人民。
This is for our country, he says.
真正的自由和真正的民主。
Our country's future, our country's hope.
The doctors here say that many of the hunger strikers have been in for medical treatment 3 and 4 times, and after they're treated, they insist on going back down to the square.
The students are very determined. If the government and leaders will not solve this problem, I don't think the people will end these things, will end this movement. They are very determined.
He's my boyfriend.
Her boyfriend has had nothing to eat or drink for 6 days. He's having heart problems now, but she says she completely supports his hunger strike.
Will you go back to the square? Will you go back? You will. How do you feel about that as a doctor?
Some of the patients should go home and rest. But if they're determined, if they insist, we respect their wishes. But if this goes on, they will be in danger. And so the ambulances make their deliveries, the doctors pile in for another pickup, and the crowds cheer. The young, who don't really understand what this is all about, and the old, who do. Talk to me about the hunger strike, she says, and the tears roll down my cheeks.
Live back at Tiananmen Square, another river of people just flowed past here shouting, "Li Peng must go." The government and the Communist Party find themselves under increasing siege, and China's own journalists are getting a taste of the free press as our special live edition of 48 Hours continues. As we continue our live coverage from 48 Hours from China, it's worth noting that the Chinese version of a generation gap is at work here. The young, the students, are pushing the reluctant leadership into change and maybe right out of office. The traditional Chinese reverence for the elders is taking a back seat to the demands of the moment. Top leader Deng Xiaoping is 84, and one sign this week here in Tiananmen Square read, and I quote, "When people get past the age of 80, they get muddle-headed."
Zhongnan High. To the Chinese, this is their White House, their Kremlin, the high-walled compound where all the top leaders work and live with their families. Today, the rebellion spread to the very gates of power, the headquarters of the government and the Communist Party.
It is unbelievable.
I walked there with Asian scholar Stephen Goldstein.
What we're seeing now in front of us are truckload after truckload of workers going by expressing their support for the students.
Now we see the headquarters of the rulers under siege. This is as if demonstrators could control access to the White House.
It's as if students of Washington demonstrated and then said that we are going to take responsibility for protecting the White House.
Normally, Chinese pedestrians are not permitted to linger in front of the gate to Zhongnan High. Today, a half-dozen weakening hunger strikers lie on the pavement, and there's nothing the guards can do about it.
Do we call this anarchy, what's going on all around us? It is not anarchy in the sense that order doesn't exist, but the students are maintaining the order.
Behind this ornate gate, the communist leaders of China have ruled like the emperors in the ancient Forbidden City, governing in secrecy, remote from the people.
They're saying to the regime, you want democracy? You talk about democracy? Here it is. Now what are you going to do about it?
And you talk about People's Republic of China, we're going to take it.
We're the people. You talk about political reform, we've got it.
Is this spreading so that they are going to control all of Beijing, the capital of
a country of 1.1 billion people?
They are certainly, as you say, beginning to control the major centers, the major political nerve centers of this city.
Steve, when do we then stop using the word demonstration and start saying revolution?
I really don't know. Revolution occurs not only when there's popular discontent, but when leaders cease to respond.
Deng Xiaoping, the protesters chant, it is time to leave the stage. The 84-year-old Deng changed China, opened his nation to the world, and created economic reforms with a touch of capitalism that are far ahead of the Soviet Union. But now the patriarch has lost his charisma.
Whatever solution they find, or whatever develops out of this, I'm beginning to feel that this will permanently change the most populous country in the world.
I think you're right. I think that what we've seen the last few days is a genuine historic event.
Good evening. In the news tonight, Premier Li Peng calls for...
News workers said Mao must serve the people. But since Mao came to this land, the tightly controlled media served the government that controlled it. Example, 2 weeks ago, Chinese television showed the swearing-in of young communists at Tiananmen Square. There was not a word about a major student demonstration in the same place later that day. Not a word, not a picture.
各位观众，晚上好。现在报告晚间新闻。
But this week, reporters find their stories leading the newscasts.
We are started telling truth, right? At least from yesterday.
So at Chinese television, reporters and camera crews hurrying to cover the biggest story of their lives now believe they will be able to tell that story the way they see it. The censor who once came daily from the Ministry of Culture isn't showing up anymore. For 27-year-old reporter Fei Cha, freedom of the press, a major demand of the students, has come at breathtaking speed.
Why? These people are here, they say, for one thing, for freedom of the press. Why? What is it that they want?
Well, they just want newspaper and television and radio to say something true.
And with this newfound courage to speak out has come credibility for reporters like Wang.
How did it feel before, when you couldn't tell the truth as a journalist?
They hate us. They hate us.
And now?
We can interview what we want, and also we can say, we can report what we want.
Today, the story was hunger-striking students. That is, if the students would allow the government journalist into their area. The decision? They were welcome. Wang had his story for the nightly English-language newscast. His executive editor, who must approve the script, is also a party member.
You better use some of the shots from...
You saw that?
Yeah.
She's crying like crazy. Then he has a stand-up of him saying this is the lane where the ambulances come, and just a very quick thing.
Hey, very good.
The stamp of approval, the script virtually unchanged.
CCTV's Chuan was at the Tiananmen Square this afternoon and has this report.
Well, that is the so-called emergency line.
To those who have tasted freedom, it will be hard if they are ordered to give it up, to go back to the old ways, even if that means the rules that were in effect just last week. And there is no guarantee it will not end as quickly as it began.
China, things happens in China. I think it's like Shakespeare's drama. The curtain never falls. You've got to wait and see.
Well, live from Tiananmen Square, and the thought that people power is playing to an ever wider audience in the People's Republic. Bruce Morton reports from inside China's largest city when we return, so stay with us. Continuing its efforts trying to defuse the situation, just a few minutes ago, the Chinese government television just released pictures of this morning's extraordinary visit to this square by the premier of the country, Li Peng, and the Communist Party leader, Zhao Ziyang. Now, according to the government account of the visit back there with the hunger strikers, the Communist Party leader told the hunger strikers, "We came too late, we should have come before." And he promised them that if they would end their strike, the government would not end its dialogue with them. As previously reported, the early indications are the hunger strikers are saying that's not enough and they aren't buying the whole thing. Tiananmen Square, 100 acres here, the largest public square in the world. And just this week, it was filled to overflow with more than 1 million people. That's a population as large as the state of Maine. The square is surrounded by memorials to the Chinese Revolution, to the people. This People's Revolution may have begun here, but it is not ending here. And among the places caught up in the fervor now is the largest city in the country, Shanghai.
Visiting the hunger strikers is not always easy. You have to come through the crowd of spectators and friends first. They're friendly, but the big crowd can shove a camera crew around. This is how one of our arrivals looked. Once you're in, though, the students show a lot of discipline. Linked hands sometimes for crowd control, ropes sometimes, and when that isn't enough, they yell at the standees. This chant goes, "Sit down." Lots do, and that makes getting around some easier. Chinese demonstrators, it turns out, like to chant. Her chants say, "Long live students, long live the people," and to love the country is not wrong. Trying for more power, she's pointing one megaphone into another. The movement needs bigger bullhorns. This was our first visit Wednesday afternoon. The crowds kept growing.
It's just after 10:30 at night, Wednesday night, Shanghai time. We passed about 4 groups of students going home on our way back to the municipal building here. But as you can see, there are plenty left in place. There are more spectators, there are more hunger strikers than when we were here this afternoon. And their mood, as you can hear, is anything but gloomy.
They applaud, this is Thursday morning now, whenever a new group marches in, but this applause was for us, for the CBS News camera crew. The students believe very strongly that a free press in China and abroad will help their cause. They devoured the newspapers that were passed out this morning. All right, one kid did have what looked like a girly book, and whether they're right or wrong about press coverage, there were a lot more reporters and cameras there today.
And I think the people in China are all supporting the students here.
You meet people at these demonstrations. We met Xiao Li, third-year international relations student. His parents and grandparents live in America. He chose to live here.
Well, I think I should stay here because I'm a Chinese. I love China.
Coming here was not without risk.
Many students are threatened that if they come to the Bund to go on hunger strike, and then they won't have good job after graduation. I think what they want is very reasonable, and what they are thinking is just what I am thinking. So I think it's up to me to come here.
He says, "I admire Gandhi in India for his nonviolence movement, and I think what we can do here is just go on a hunger strike."
Because, you know, we won for quite a long time. From the Main Force movement in 1919 to 1989, we have waited for almost 70 years. We just want science. We want democracy. We want freedom.
They do not all want elections now. They want the government and the party to speak to them and their concerns.
Not to overthrow the government, but to make the government pay attention?
Yes, because I don't think that there's another party or political group.
How serious are they? The young man being talked to is Sun Jiangyu from the Shanghai Electric Power Institute. The older people are from his school. They're trying to talk him into quitting the hunger strike and going back to school. He said no. They offered him what looked like vitamins and water. He said no. Sun did have to leave later, though. The medics said so, and they're medical students, not authority figures from the adult world. Sun argued with them too, but he lost. When he left, the crowd applauded him. They really are disciplined. Medics, caretaken not to disturb the few police they face. They're sophisticated in some ways, naive in others. They hope to win. They do not all think they will. He says China has lost so many chances in the past, we don't think we should lose more chances.
All day, more and more groups, more and more banners have come marching down the Bund. Shanghai Television, the Journalists Union, the Drama Group, a Christian Institute. The students have started something, started a movement here in Shanghai, and it's hard to imagine it ending anytime soon.
The sign says, "Mama, we did it for your sake." Mama in this Chinese phrase can mean either mother or country. They are patriots. But Xiao Li thinks he may go to America after all.
China's cry for freedom and democracy is also being heard in the United States. This is San Francisco, students delivering a letter to the Chinese consulate, urging the leadership in Beijing to heed the will of the people. A similar letter is delivered in New York.
We are a group of students from Columbia University.
My name is Yuan Jiang. I am from Beijing.
I'm from Sichuan province.
I'm from Beijing.
I come from Wuhan.
There are more than 25,000 Chinese students studying in the United States. For these Columbia University graduate students, their link with colleagues at more than 50 other American campuses is both the telephone and the computer.
We are now in a most critical moment for China's future.
And of course, television.
Is the CBS Evening News. News sources tell us that the Army has told the government it will not act against the demonstrators unless it's called to put down violent riots.
As you saw all of these demonstrators today, more than 1 million in the square, what thoughts went through your mind?
Well, I wish I were there, but I'm here.
Here you are, we're on Broadway here in New York. You are touching and feeling this thing called democracy and freedom, something that the students in Tiananmen Square in Beijing are willing to put their lives on the line for, to go up against the Chinese government. Do you think it's worth it?
I think it is quite worth it for Chinese students sometimes to take a radical action or sacrifice their life in order to obtain freedom and democracy.
31-year-old Chung Yu wants to be involved in the action. A graduate student at the University of Chicago. She is expecting her first child in November, but this morning her mind was on the crisis back home.
I think it has a lot of historical significance, and also emotionally I'm so moved by the students, so I want to be part of it.
Chung Yu is on her way to Beijing now to add one more voice to the 1 million plus already there.
With us here in Tiananmen Square, and we're honored to have her here, is Betty Bao Lord, author, authority on Chinese history and lore, and wife of the former ambassador of the United States to China. Betty, what does this tremendous concern for the hunger strikers tell us about China, and do you know anybody out here?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I know one of the young students who are in one of those buses who has been on a hunger strike for the last 4 days and on a water strike for 1 day. His parents are very proud of him, and they have stood by him. In fact, they've made the ultimate sacrifice. They don't go to see him because it would be too emotional, and they're afraid that he would break down. And so at one end of this square are the parents praying for him, and in one of those buses, their child.
This is the traditional, deep Chinese concern for children.
Yes.
What's the most important thing for Americans to know about these extraordinary events this week?
I think it's because This square is where the Communist Party and the Peasant Revolution came in to take the capital. And at that time, people welcomed them. People felt this was their leader. These are the leaders who could speak for him. I think what we see today are people who feel they can speak for themselves. And this is a big change. Perhaps not because the party has made them all into a jail, put them in a jail, but they psychologically, in many ways, have put themselves into a jail. They have felt they have to look to somebody to speak for them. And I think they have found out today they can speak very well for themselves. Also, the second point is there's an old Chinese traditional saying that says one Chinese can carry a pail of water, 2 Chinese can only carry a half bucket of water, and 3 Chinese can't carry a drop of water. And what we're seeing today are strangers working together, caring for one each other, and doing something together without having been told by somebody else to do it.
Betty Bell Lord, thank you very much. Now, when we come back, we'll be looking at a lot of things, including the latest from the square. But before we do that, let's note that there's been a kind of stunned silence from Washington during this week of remarkable change in China. And with me now to talk about that, the Soviet-Chinese summit and what's happening here, are 2 of our experienced correspondents in Washington, Leslie Stahl, our White House correspondent, and Bill Plant, our State Department correspondent. Leslie Stahl, George Bush is the only American president ever to have lived in China and one of the few to know very much about the Far East at all. Any indication of what he may think about all of this?
Well, Dan, the White House has been, as you pointed out, virtually silent on this whole issue. I will tell you, though, that privately, the White House is extremely grateful that it was Gorbachev and not George Bush who was there during this demonstration. This would have been extremely difficult for this man to have handled. After all, how could the leader of the free world not walk out among those students? They're quoting Lincoln, they're fighting, they're dying, some of them obviously, for freedom and democracy. And yet, as a diplomat in China, George Bush was, it would have been extremely difficult for him to have crossed his old friend Deng Xiaoping and to have done that. So they're very grateful that it's Gorbachev who was embarrassed and not George Bush.
Dan?
And Bill Plant, was our State Department caught completely off guard by all of this?
Dan, I have to tell you that the first reaction we hear from all of official Washington is that they are very glad that for once it's Gorbachev who's being upstaged instead of George Bush. They are delighted that Gorbachev had to change his schedule, had to be taken in the back way, that he got very little international media coverage. But on an official level, Dan, they take a rather ho-hum and nonchalant attitude toward this. They maintain that it doesn't really affect U.S. interests, although there are some conservative voices warning that it may very well if the 2 communist giants drop the tensions between them.
Bill Plant and Leslie Stahl, thank you very much. Charles Kuralt has been with us here watching the student rebellion become a mass movement, and in a moment, his special perspective on a week that could change China forever. Boy, crazy. Friend and colleague Charles Kuralt. Charles, as journalists, we all too often sometimes say, well, this is an exciting and momentous occasion, an historic occasion. This time I have a feeling we may actually be right about that.
I can't think of any parallel experience. I can't think of any parallel in human history, to tell you the truth, Dan. A genuine uprising from the people, not orchestrated from on high. It has been a very moving experience to see. We're used to big crowds. We're used to focusing on demonstrations and having to tell people, well, other parts of the city are calm. No part of this city, and today, no part of China is calm. People are in a patriotic fervor, and patriotic is what they think this is.
And it has a spontaneity and authenticity that is unique. It occurred to me that so often our cameras are accused, and rightly so, of distorting an event, making it seem larger than it really is. This time it seems to me that our cameras are not large enough to take in the scope and importance of this.
The Chinese don't know where this is all going. The people, all these millions don't know. The people in the government buildings don't know, and we don't know. I am sure, however, that we're going to be telling our grandchildren that we were in China this week.
It's an unsettling time. I don't find myself afraid of anything, and the Chinese don't seem to be afraid, but there is that sense of they're plunging into the unknown.
They know what they want. They want something like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, the press, freedom of assembly. They want an end to corruption, by which, in talking to many of these people, I have come to understand as an end to what they call the back door, the necessity to have a connection, pull, to get anything done. They know that some people get good apartments. They know that some people can change their jobs, but they know they can't. And millions of people all over China are saying, that's wrong. You shouldn't have to have a back door. You shouldn't have to have government corruption. In a country as great as China, they always had that.
And these hunger strikers, the hardcore back there in the square, they've said time and time again, listen, the party elite and their families get special treatment, and we're through with that.
Communist Party members are saying the same thing. Workers are saying the same thing. Yesterday, you remember an event like this in little moments. Yesterday, a great truck full of workers and leading a convoy of other such trucks came down just one of the streets miles from here in the suburbs. And people lined the streets cheering, and the banner across the front of the lead truck said, addressing itself to the hunger strikers, "Hang on, little brothers, your big brothers are here now." Something about this kind of experience sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it?
It sure does. Thanks, Charles. There's an old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. What will these interesting times bring? More turmoil? Very likely. More freedom and democracy? Maybe. There's little doubt that this is a turning point for modern China and for world communism. It could well be a new people's revolution for the 1990s and beyond. As another Chinese proverb says, in the past, open up the future. That is what seems to be happening here, now, in China. Ending the past, opening up the future. I'm Dan Rather, reporting from Beijing. Until next week, that's 48 hours. Next on 48 Hours, Hollywood meets history.
Mama, can't you see what this movie's doing to me?
America's forgotten heroes return to action.
I had no idea that the black soldiers made that much of a difference.
In a battle that's more than a movie.
A lot of times the blacks don't have a chance to work.
Lights, camera, war. Next week, and 2 weeks from tonight,
Let me go!
deprogramming. The desperate battle for the mind of a 14-year-old boy.
I get this fear that he's going to hate me forever.
Pitting his mother against a church she calls a cult.
You don't really love me.
That's in 2 weeks.
A stunning announcement will shock Abby's lovers and her enemies on a special 2-hour season finale of Knots Landing next. For a transcript of 48 Hours, send $4 to Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.